Hello and welcome, everyone. We're live. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We've got a really good one, action-packed agenda for you. My name is Matt Price, one of the three amigos here with the Object First Zero Gravity team. A few housekeeping notes to kick us off. We are simulcasting on three separate platforms, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on X, formerly known as Twitter. So wherever you're tuning in from, we really do appreciate it. The other piece of really exciting news is today's show is all about Veeam. We're the best storage for Veeam, so who better to bring a former Veeamer on board? But it doesn't stop there. We're actually doing a raffle where you may be able to win a free pass to Veeam On. So what I want to do right out of the gate is throw up this QR code. So if you're interested in attending Veeam On 2024 down in South Florida this year, scan the QR code and you'll get all the details about how you can enter to win a free pass. So guys, it's a great show lined up. Welcome.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, are we allowed to scan, or is that only for non-show participants?
I've already scanned. I don't know about you guys.
I'm scanning.
Competition's getting thick.
I'm trying to get a free pass myself. So, one of the fun things about this guest, he needs no introduction when you talk to the Veeam community. I remember when I first started at Veeam, he was leading the systems engineering team. I know Sterling and I, both got some lineage there. So welcome, Mr. Scott Lillis, the CEO of Lillis Technology Group. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Scott.
Thanks, guys. Thrilled to be here.
Great to see you. We see you've upgraded your studio setup. It looks phenomenal.
Excellent. Great to hear. Yeah,
looking crystal
shoemaker
clear.
shoes. So it's time for an upgrade, and we've done that. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here, chat with you guys. Exciting times, awesome giveaway. So Veeam On is going to be great. Definitely take advantage of that, folks. That's a huge one. So good deal.
Yeah, Scott, did you scan the QR code, or are you going to be at Veeam On already?
I should be at there, but I'll scan the QR code too.
Why not? Can't lose.
Everybody else is.
Yeah.
All the cool kids will be there. So we hope to see you, Scott. So
yeah,
why don't
absolutely.
we just jump right into the topic of today's show? It's all about securing your Veeam backups. And before we went live, Scott, we were talking about, back when yourself and Sterling and I were on the Veeam side of the fence, it used to be all about backup performance and getting the most capacity and in security. Yes, it was there. Yes, it was a thought, but it wasn't the thought. Why don't you share with us from your, perspective, how you're seeing that shift in the industry where security is now becoming the initial, requirement when you look at backups?
Yeah, it's a great question, Matt. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think over the last few years, even since I left Veeam, so I was there from 2009 to 2018, that's when I started my own company. We're 100% focused Veeam solution providers. So that's all we do day in, day out, Veeam professional services. We've worked with hundreds of clients. And, when I first started the company, one thing that we often got called into were tactical responses to ransomware. So people would be calling us up and saying, holy cow, we've been hit. We need to do a big recovery. Let's get you on there, blank checkbook, round the clock, insurance is paying for it. Good times, right? Not good that they were compromised, but good they were able to recover. Over the course of time, we never see that anymore because the backup target is, the first thing they target, the backup repository. So, our first question is, did they get the backups encrypted? And if they're not on immutability, they did. That's the first thing they're hitting. They've gotten smarter. They're evolving. These teams of ransomware experts, some are financially driven, that are globally stateless. Some are state run. There are a lot of different wars. It's kind of like that Risk game, right? If your business is out there, we're in the middle of a cyber war, you're your own little country. So you've got to protect your assets. And that's where we're seeing, more dovetailing of backup and data protection into the security space, which ultimately I think is where it belonged in the first place, right? If you look traditionally over the last 20 years or so, data protection was usually on the infrastructure team, right? The guys running Windows, the guys running Unix, they would back things up. In a past life, I ran a very large Unix environment. I was manager director of Unix server support at a large insurance company with 6,000 Linux Solaris boxes, and we almost never pulled from backups. We didn't trust them, so we architected the application around it, and backups became like a checkbox, right? Now it's really integral, where it's not just, hey, my file's gone, I need to get it back. There's certainly that, but the introduction of data labs, of replication, of multi-cloud, of having a solution that can be there to wherever your data flows is key. And so we're seeing, both with investments that Veeam is making and other competitors into this security ecosystem, where it's becoming a tool for the security team. They're reporting to a lot of the same people, audit, compliance, things of that nature, and it's becoming an evolving capability. So yeah, it's a the securing of your environment and security teams owning it are key moving forward. I think that's the next big evolution that we're going to see happen.
You gotta break down those silos, right? You gotta have them all at least speaking in the same language. I mean, gone are the days where, I always talk to this back in our days, the older days of Veeam. You even had the virtualization team was even different than the storage team, which was also different than the server team. And so we see all these things blend. It sort of seems like a natural dovetail, right? To really have now the security team in on it. When we think about having to really recover from a ransomware attack, number one, we talk about, making sure that your permissions are separated from the actual backup storage and, from the actual data mover nowadays. We have to consider those things. What types of trends or things have you seen that have changed within your architecture discussions, let's say back in sort of 2018-ish versus today, with sort of that locality of the data? Are customers still putting their data as much into the cloud, or are they rethinking these types of things so that they can recover quickly?
I think it's we were talking earlier, I think it's a jump ball right now, right? So it depends on where you want your data to be. Ultimately, regardless of what platform you're living on in the moment, your data is your data. Your business is run on your data. The applications that manipulate, manage, and add value to your clients is ultimately, based on your data. There may be different tools, different ways to access it. It may live in AWS or Azure. It may live on-prem. You may have a DR location. You may be in flux, right? We saw a huge flood of people moving into the cloud. Now we're seeing people move out of the cloud. There's been changes. Sometimes they're capability changes. Sometimes they're corporate changes. I believe that, with the Broadcom acquisition of VMware, we're probably at the genesis of the next disruption cycle, right? So if you go through, and this is something that I've watched through the years very closely, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times, right? Because, with that acquisition, they're clearly there's a lot of unknowns, right? But what we are seeing immediately is, probably some additional profit taking, some additional challenges in who can do what with VMware. It's a new direction. And given that the platform is pervasive, just about everything is running on it now, is that going to accelerate the move to no code, stateless, things running in AWS, Azure, Google, or the next cloud? Are they going to run on-prem? Are you going to run containers on-prem? I mean, there's that solution as well. So, there's a lot of options which are good. So it really takes a huddle where there's a lot more capabilities, and with more capabilities comes more complexity. And security conversations, back to your first question, it's first and foremost now, right? And back to the immutability, is always table stakes. That's where we start now. It's no point in even beginning a security conversation until your backups are immutable. If they're not immutable right now, if you're waiting for hardware to be ordered, if you're deciding whether you're going to go with Ootbi or, stay doing what you're doing, don't. You don't have time. Clock's up. You don't have next year's budget cycle to get to. You will be compromised by that. Most companies have been already. If you're the VP sitting there making that decision, you're doing a disservice to your company. You have to do it now. I mean, this is a critical juncture. And then working with the security teams, the immutability is table stakes, right? There's other things that Veeam does to really, if you think about backups, back to my risk assessment, your data protection is your fortress, right? That's where your data is. That's where all your important stuff is. That's the keys to the kingdom. With immutability, if you've got a well-funded security team that is doing pen testing and honeypots and looking at log files and using AI technologies and Yara rules and everything else that's out there, yeah, you've got a great offensive army, you've got a pretty good defensive army, but you don't even have your fortress locked. They could just walk right in and take it. That's where you've got to be. So table stakes, lock that up tight. Taking Veeam off of the network is another big one. Don't let it be accessible. Make it very hard for them to do. But nothing trumps immutability in the air gap you get with it, because they have time on their side. They have time, and and by they, I mean these collective ransomware bad actors, black hats, whatever you want to call them. They're saying most compromised environments the ransomware doesn't get triggered for 6, 8, 12, 24 months, right? If they're going to want to get money out of you and your stock just tanked because you're Boeing and you just missed shipping a huge product and you're financially in the dumps, they're going to hold. We'll nail them next year. We'll wait till they actually have money. So they have the benefit of sitting on your network, and maybe they're going to exfiltrate the data instead of trying to hit you with ransomware. We all talk about the traditional, hey, I own your system now, pay me $10 million and I'll give you the crypto keys to unlock it. But there's more to it than that. What about intellectual property? What about personal information? What about health information? What about information that can target and be sold to other people? I mean, there's an entire global industry around this that lurks just under the covers. So, back to my point, I think this becomes a security tool. It has to help enhance the security tools that you have, if that talk track makes sense.
So my concern in all of this is always the people at the end of the problem, right? Because everything you just said, Scott, the three of us, Sterling, Matt, and I, we work at Object First. It's a startup. We wear many hats, as they say. And our days, I don't think, could be any more complicated than they already are. I can't imagine the life of an actual technical person who's managing backups now hearing, I have to go become a security expert on top of everything else I'm already doing. In your experience and from what you've seen in the market today, how are they coping with this?
That's a great question. And so it's blurring the lines, right? At the end of the day, when we do a Veeam implementation, it's a brand new greenfield implementation, especially in the enterprise. And we'll talk about that a little bit, where it's a very siloed organization. They have a lot of rules. They've got a lot of compliance and checks and balances. When we go to do an implementation, just for, say, Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, right? There's a lot of ports that need to be opened in the network for Veeam to do what it does. At the end of the day, if you look at replication or disaster recovery, what we're doing is we're taking all of your data, right? And we're moving it from point A to point B. Every system that they have in place is to prevent you from doing exactly that, or anybody from doing exactly that. So you have to really have some pretty advanced conversations with your security team. When you get into larger enterprises that are more locked down, they take this stuff seriously. They have, a lot of consultants, investment, a bigger spend ultimately has more toys and more tools, right? But, it goes to collaboration and being able to have a working relationship. And, even when I was in the enterprise, the biggest challenge of the enterprise is the silos. There's a perception for people who haven't worked in that space that it's more mature. It's quite the opposite. I mean, the best tech person you'll see is, a school system IT director that's chief cook and bottle washer and setting up, 6,000 laptops one day and, updating the website the next day. They do everything. Whereas you get into the larger enterprise and, what are the motivators? What are they doing? Are they a sales organization? Are they an R&D organization? What is it that they do? Because once you understand that, you'll understand the motivations that get driven down. And then what compliance concerns do they have? If they're a government subcontractor, are they, following all the principles, and have they been audited? And when they were audited, did they look at the backups? Were they able to recover? Did they pass that audit? So, Veeam fits in very nicely, and Object First fits in very nicely into those enterprise scenarios, because it is, the nice thing about it is, back to the fortress analogy with Ootbi, it's literally set it and forget it. This is not a heavy lift to fix this problem. It's a giant gaping problem. It's 15 minutes to rack, stack, plug the thing in, boot it up, point your backups at it, go, you're secured. And for larger enterprises, robo offices, it can be a great solution for that. You may not use them for your, 110 petabytes on your primary location, but say you've got a federated model, you're a manufacturer with, 20 different sites around the globe. Ootbi is a great solution to land locally, be secure, and then decide where you're going to go from there. Am I going to DR back to the mothership? Am I going to DR everything into AWS? Do I have the bandwidth to do that? So it's a cost-effective and easy solve. So you don't really have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. It's a checkbox. So, like I said, if you haven't done it again already, you need to have them yesterday. We actually had a client last year that had redone everything, and they had ordered hardware, and it may have even been that the ransomware people had been in there for some period of time and saw that they ordered immutable servers. Boom, they hit them before the hardware got there. So Veeam was up and running, and they got compromised before they had immutability. It's the nice thing about going into the security teams as opposed to the infrastructure team is infrastructure is usually about containing costs. Our VMware licensing is extraordinary. Our storage license extraordinary. All of those things get under that umbrella and get captured. And, if your line of business needs an extra 5 terabytes that they didn't forecast for, that's sucking budget up out of what would have been your data protection. Now, if you can roll that up into the budget under security through these connections, and because ultimately that's where it needs to live, the decision to say, crap, we have a hole here, we're at risk, fix it tomorrow. They have budgets that are more nimble and capable of reacting to that sort of a scenario than infrastructure is. Get in line with these, 9 different spends that we have that we've got to do to keep the lights on. So I think you're seeing a blur, not just with security and data protection, but also the infrastructure engineer is not really an infrastructure engineer anymore.
And how about the data itself too, right? I mean, we're also
Right.
changing in how we're using the data. There's the data, and then there's the data about the data, that metadata that so many of these AI
Yes.
programs were relying on that. So I'm assuming that a lot of these architecture discussions, it really is predicated on whether the customer knows what they want to do with their data, right? It's not just a matter of saving your data to the cloud, saving your data to a data center. What are we going to do with that data? Can we collect that data in those robo offices that you're talking about, put into a central place, and then use that AI to watch for either some of these attacks or solving problems with that data, right? I mean, that's puts a new set of parameters around that as well.
Well, and it's educating them on what can be done, right? Because a lot of people don't even know. I mean, Sure Backup and Data Labs was a Veeam innovation that was game changing. When we saw that drop, that capability to run a VM directly off of your data protection image, that was game changing. I mean, that's where Veeam kicked into hyperdrive with that capability. Everybody else has it. I don't think they've ever attacked them with a patent wise, but it's a powerful patent, especially when it comes into your security teams. You can pen test your production environment without running risk, especially the red button items. If you do like SQL injection or things that are really more aggressive, some things are just destructive, and you either have them or you don't. And if you hit that red button, it blows up or it doesn't blow up.
You
If
know
it
what?
blows up, you're down.
I think that that's a really good point. And for everybody listening that doesn't really know, without getting too deep under the covers, is this awesome thing called virtual labs within Veeam. And you can run these virtual labs or even virtual machines, recovering them in an instant directly to an object first Ootbi. So you can run multiple of these things. You're undergoing some sort of an attack or perhaps an anomaly. And you just need to check these things out. Very easy to bring up one server or a set of servers in a walled off environment, right, Scott? So you can
Right.
pen test these things, you can run these things, you can hammer these things, you can run YARA rules against them and check for certain strains of malware. So super easy that you can do this built within Veeam directly on an Ootbi. That was a great point. I wanted to explain really the technology that you're talking about. It's really a game changer.
Yeah. And it opens a positive Pandora's box of capability, right? So it's not just that, it's the secure restores, right? So if you've been compromised in for whatever reason, so you're on immutable storage, but they still seize the whole environment and they've locked you down and you've made the decision to recover, from when is the next question. When was I infected? How long ago was I infected? Can I clean this production environment before I just push it back in? Otherwise, you're loading up a system that was in the process of encrypting in the first place, and you spend a day getting something back up and running and just to find out the next morning you're encrypted again. So doing forensics on that data is tremendous. And then to your point from before, AI getting layered on top of this is all about attaching to that metadata. Can your data protection solution, and this is new with the latest version of Veeam, look for anomalous write behavior that's indicative of a ransom attack, so that you're proactively alerted to say, hey, something's going on here. In the talk to them, step out of what you're doing normally, and know they're watching at that point. Once you're compromised, you have to assume they're watching your Teams chat or your email systems or anything else, and trust nothing, trust nobody. But
right.
Now you've got that capability of really failing back to the point right before the infection happened. Infections are going to happen. That's another thing. You cannot stop it. YARA rules are, give us the latest, for lack of a better term, a virus definition, right? The latest and greatest things that we know hit. Well, guess what the downside of that is? When I find as a security analyst a new hole in a new product, how do we fix it? We tell people about it. So there's a general consensus. There's a place where you're uploading all of this. Your bad actors see it too. So I don't even need to have a well-tuned plan. I'm just going to hit you with whatever's active right now that I know you can't possibly have responded to because they just published it last night at midnight. So the ability to get into your system is huge. Again, immutability is your only stop out to where it's your fail-safe.
And segmentation of those passwords, right? Not even being able to get into those things. So, I mean, to make sure that, hey, you have been owned, but the same permissions that are writing data to the actual object storage, you look at your object storage, you look at your Ootbi, your data's there. Happy days.
Cool.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to kind of elaborate a bit on, Scott, all this conversation is great, and we know breaches are going to occur. Matter of fact, as part of zero trust data resilience, we have to assume a breach, everywhere.
Yes.
So one of the things that I think is fundamentally critical when you explore different Veeam repository choices that are out there is you're always going to be sacrificing something if you look at security, performance, as well as simplicity. That is, unless you go with Ootbi. And what I mean by that is, take a deduplication appliance as an example. We all know that, best practice from Veeam land is not to back up directly to them, but let's say that's your only choice. Well, one of the best practices is to enable encryption to make sure your data can't be exploited. Well, guess what that does to dedupe, right? You get zero space savings. So now that's
Right.
rendered useless. Performance, we know that's another big hit if you have something like that. So when you look at really the best of breed, and this is why we say we're the best storage for Veeam, we've kind of taken those three fundamental ideals and pre-built the appliance to have all that pre-provisioned, for lack of a better term, right? Security, pre-provisioned. RAID 6, pre-provisioned. Simplicity, pre-provisioned. Powerful SOS API integration, pre-provisioned. So you don't have to configure anything. So for those that are watching, when we talk about, Scott mentioned 15 minutes, I shared a QR code earlier. Anthony and I, we actually did a series of videos where we show you exactly how that's achievable, where you can literally rack this thing and be sending your Veeam backups to it in 15 minutes. No security expertise, no storage expertise, really, right? You don't have to modify block sizes or stripe sizes or decide, should I go RAID 5 or 10 or 6 or 60? None of that stuff. It's pre-provision in accordance with Veeam's best practices. So it's turnkey.
Yeah, and keeping it simple is huge. There's enough complexity there that we talked about. Thank God, at least there's one simple thing. And it's what excites me about Ootbi the most is just knowing that it's the same team that built Veeam and the innovation and how that works. Having a firsthand seat to watching that throughout the years. I know great things are going to come out of this and evolve, but even from the get-go, we were a launch partner, and we got a box early release, gave it to one of my architects. I'm like, hey, you've got the day, kick the tires, come up with a story, beat the snot out of it, let me know. Got a call back in a half hour. It's like, done. It's up and running. There's nothing to do. It's simple. And I mean, there's some beauty in that, right? I mean, the last thing you need is a 3-day project that could be 15 minutes. So really, the only blocker for you is if you're not running immutability now, and depending on the size of your environment, even if you've got the mothership is protected per se, and the remote sites aren't, drop an Ootbi in there. I mean, it's going to ease your recovery. It's going to fix your RPOs on the edge, right? And then you have all that capability with it. And we're excited about the innovation that I'm sure will end up coming. So it's a great solution for us. We mention it in just about every conversation we have, and we work with absolutely hundreds of Veeam customers. But the other nice thing is having this object first as a separate entity. Is one of the powers of Veeam is the power of choice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, object first is a choice, but it's not the only choice. A lot of other products, solutions out there have vendor lock-in. You got their box, they have immutability, but it's done. If there's, for whatever reason, they can charge you whatever they want next year. You always have the leverage to say, hey, we have this standard stack. Let's put Ootbi in at the remote sites. At least you have some leverage from a negotiation with other vendors, right? We've always said that there's power in choice, but there's also power in relationships and partnerships, and you couldn't have a tighter one than Veeam and Object First. And then as that grows, Veeam's investment in the security stack, and I'm sure Object First in there as well, enters that conversation. There's a lot more that can be done with AI, with, how do we get ahead of this? How do we respond to it? How do we quickly keep business in business, right? And I know one of the product managers at Veeam that we hire. He runs the Unix side of things, Mr. Tom S. Over there. He came from a manufacturer. We hired him from there. He was running Veeam with the very first version of instant VM recovery. and they took a array hit. Small manufacturer, made screen doors or something, nothing terribly exciting, but it's a business, right? And it runs and it pays a lot of people's salaries, and it would have been down. Took a hit, lost the array, ran it off of a Veeam backup for a couple weeks while he got new storage in. And the reason we were able to lure him over is nobody appreciated him. He was chief cook and bottle washer, did this amazing thing where, hey, we're not actually down. I'm running on a backup, which is some amazing capability. This is going back, probably 10 years plus. Nobody really cared. So there's some superhero stuff you can do with Veeam and Ootbi, and just having an understanding of your options. There's a lot of new options coming in now, and Veeam's positioned itself as the tool that's going to move with your data wherever it is. So whether you're in the cloud, whether you're on-prem, everybody's kind of a hybrid version of somewhere else. If you look at it like in SaaS as well, right? I mean, that's another thing. Salesforce data, Microsoft 365 data. It's all your data wherever it lives. So,
Yep.
Getting it back and an immutable target is where it's all at.
Yeah, and I love the way that you've positioned this, Scott, because we often find ourselves in conversations, people who are like, oh, who are your competitors? Or, are you competing with the cloud or other storage? And it's like, no, we absolutely see ourselves as that immutable storage target where data lands and it stays secure. We're not trying to boot out other people or remove or reduce the functionality of like a dedupe appliance or cloud store. Like they have their place, they have their purpose. But we're solely focused on this security level of backup, right? Like how do we take Veeam backup data and put it in the most secure box possible? And some people actually take umbrage with this because we talk about zero access and say, you don't have access to the root or operating system or the command line interface. You get none of that. And you're like, well, I'm not so sure. As an admin, I need access to this. And I said, well, it's all part of the larger zero trust framework we're trying to put out there. And, I always encourage people, if you haven't had a chance, and I'm sure you've seen it, Scott, but people take a look at our zero trust data resilience research paper we put out recently. And white paper, but it's a great primer that highlights a lot of what you've already been saying, Scott. And it digs into all of the facets of building backup software, backup storage, and backup infrastructure that embodies the principles of zero trust, not just a single appliance you rack, stack, and walk away from and assume it's just giving you zero trust vibes in your backups.
Yeah. And I think there's benefit in focus as well, right?
Yeah.
So the analogy where Object First comes in and what's excited is it is, custom built for Veeam. It's object storage, so it'll work other places. I'm sure that'll evolve, but there is definitely the concept of the right tool for the job. And sometimes you can get by with a generalist product. Other times, when it's really important, like this, use the best product in the market for it. And I think that really makes a lot of sense, is that focus really gives you that enhanced capability. It's just like, I can probably do everything I need to do in my life with a dump truck. I can go pick up groceries in a dump truck all day long. It's great. Do I really need it? No. Is it overkill? Maybe a little bit. So, not the right tool for the job. It's probably better to have a couple different solutions based on what you're trying to get done to be more efficient and more capable, right? Because, you don't want to park that dump truck at Walmart anytime soon. So,
Yeah, well, like we've joked that, it would be super secure, but floods and hammers and other outside influences, there's only so much we can protect the data from.
Ootbi is not yet Florida proof.
Right.
Right. Well, and stupid human proof too. There's no shortage of that these days either. So, that's another thing, is self-inflicted gunshot wounds. They're a very real thing in tech. So, that's also nice to be able to flip back and kind of roll back to your recovery point objectives and have much more granularity that you're able to do to say, all right, you screwed up. When did you screw up? Well, I deleted it sometime between when I got here and got my second cup of coffee. So, that's my timeline. So you could kind of dig in and go through and figure out that point in time. Okay, there you did it. Let's go back right before that moment in time, and then you can roll forward, and then you add application capabilities on that, the rolling logs and databases and things like that. There's really a lot. So there's a lot of moving parts to focus on, but what people know and what they're learning is changing. And the compliance and the business drivers are changing as well. And depending on what it is that you can do, the $100 million MGM compromise makes the news, but what doesn't make the news is when the widget that makes a supersonic fighter jet do amazing stuff gets taken and replicated by an enemy state or something like that. Nobody ever hears about that. You don't even necessarily know what happened. So the exfiltration of data is a big one too, that sometimes the biggest damage is the one you don't even know happened. So it's a big problem to solve, and it takes good communication, and it takes, at the end of the day, a fortified, starting point. And I think that's what you get here. Like, if you have your backups on immutable storage with all these capabilities, you at least know, all right, I've got a starting point. I can get back where I need to be. Otherwise, you're just negotiating, and insurance is going to audit you against it. There are insurance companies asking if you're on immutable storage. They know what it is. You pay out a few $100 million and you quickly learn terms, right? And nobody's safe. I mean, I could think of small governments I'd compromise before I'd screw with a casino. They're really scary, right? So if you talk about security, you're talking about the pinnacle of security in the world for the last 100 years, probably since there's been, Sterling has worked in federal, I've worked in federal. I've worked with a lot of the casinos. I don't know whose tech I'd stack up against whose tech. They've got some pretty impressive crap at casinos, such that, you rip off one for $100 million. I wouldn't want that bounty.
No.
My point is, nothing's safe, right? And, so you've got to do the right thing. You've got to do the very best you can do right now. Very best you can do right now is air-gapped and immutable. And if you're not yet, you need to do it yesterday. And whether you're SMB, whether you're enterprise, it really doesn't matter. Regardless of the size of your environment, it's your enterprise, right? So it's it's something to navigate.
Yeah, I like how you put that, Scott. It's it's your enterprise, regardless if you're SMB or full blown, multinational enterprise. It's still your data. It's still important to you. It still keep your business's lights on, right, during the day. So, with that, as we start to kind of wrap things up, a couple final thoughts. I think I want to double down on what Anthony said earlier, and we are not trying to be the end all be all to your data lifecycle journey. I think it's critical that we've all discussed 32110. Get the data in multiple places, check the data for recoverability first, make sure you have immutability and encryption working in tandem, because let's not forget, ransomware is not only about holding the data hostage with encryption, like locking it down. It's about exfiltrating it, like leaking it on the web, right? And if your data is not encrypted, it could be immutable all day long, and that won't stop that situation. So it's important to have encryption and immutability working in concert together, as well as creating these multiple resiliency zones with getting that data off site. And the last thing I'll say before I pitch it around to do some final thoughts is, totally off topic, don't forget about the free raffle to win a trip to Veeam on 2024. I'm going to throw this QR code up again. It'll be a free pass. The QR code takes you to the website to register. I'm going to leave that up throughout the remainder of the show as we wrap things up. So with that, Sterling, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, man. I mean, this has been a great conversation. Scott, really appreciate your time. We talked a little bit about the trends of where people are storing their data, the fact that this is a solution and you really need to think about your data journey, where you put your data, and then the ease of being able to recover data when you use Veeam and Object First. So, all in all, I just thought these were great insights, and I look forward to more of these and spending some time with you at Veeam on. Scott, maybe there's a little live stream with us in the future. What do you think, Anthony?
That would be great.
Yeah, no, I hope we get a chance to do some more chatting and filming at VeeamON, Scott. And the only thing I'll add is, if you're going to be at VeeamON, whether virtual or physical, there's plenty of ways to engage with all of us at the event. Keep tuned to the Object First socials to hear all those details coming at you real soon.
Awesome. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here, guys. It's always a pleasure. Great conversation had. Every time we get together and we do this, it's going to be great. Looking forward to seeing you at VeeamON. I think it's a must go for everybody, or at least attend the online. There's again, back to the disruption cycle, and I won't drive into that much. This is the time to be watching things. We're at the genesis of big change again in the industry, and attending VeeamON, that's done a really good job at getting themselves in, kind of front and center in this security picture, is going to be really very interesting over the next couple of few years. So good place to start, get a great take on what's possible now, because the bad guys are evolving very quickly. They're all going to black hat and everything else, and you've got to stay on top of it as well, because you're ultimately a steward of your company's data if you're in this position. So
Yep.
With that, appreciate it. Love the Object First story, and look forward to continuing to work with you guys.
Yeah, Scott, thanks so much for your time. Always a pleasure to see a former Veeamer and have a great chat. And I hope to see you at VeeamON and those viewers as well. Let's see you guys down in South Florida. Until the next show, y'all have a great day.
Have a good one.